User research without users. Damn, you must be fucking stupid. Humans, the individual, so each particular person is quite hard to predict. But on aggregate, we're a lot more predictable, and some of our characteristics can be quite good proxies for the way we behave. So that's essentially why my product works. People are like, oh no, but these are AI. It can do rational stuff. It can't really do the more humane, the more softer stuff. And surprisingly, they're really good. What we want is humaneness. We want biases. If I can get an LLM to have a confirmation bias, to have a recency bias, to have an availability bias, that's perfect for me because that's how humans work.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. Today's episode is the first of a two-part mini-series I'm excited to bring you. We are diving deep into synthetic research and its implication for marketing and product development. My guest today, Hugo Alves, is the co-founder and chief product officer at Synthetic Users, a platform that uses AI personas for product research and testing. With a fascinating background spanning clinical psychology, academic research, and product management, Hugo gives us a very unique perspective. In this episode, we chat about how LLMs can simulate human behavior and decision-making, the technology behind creating diverse synthetic users with realistic personalities, how their platform helps companies get valuable product feedback without real users, and the future of AI-powered research. Let's dive right in. Hey Hugo, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Chris. A pleasure to be here.
All right, before jumping into what you do, your background, which is super interesting, I wanted to ask you something on something that I've seen on your website. So from an article, one of the research studies that you think you have on the site, you say LLMs possess the remarkable ability to empathize with and infer the thoughts, emotions, and actions of specific groups of people. When did you realize that was possible and how did that happen?
Okay, so this takes us back to the origin story behind synthetic users. So when this is something that I'm slightly ashamed of confessing, but we started the product completely the opposite way that you see people saying you should start the product. So you should start with a need, and then you go about and figure out what technology you can use for that need. It was completely the other way around. Me and Kwame, we've been colleagues for 10 years now. Kwame was my first employer in the tech world. I was doing support for academic research before, and we stayed friends for many years. And when GPT-3 came out, before ChatGPT existed, so you had to use the playground or the API, we started messaging each other. Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this? What it can do now? And we ended up deciding that let's figure out how to use this amazing technology to help product people. And along the way of that journey, we experimented with a lot of different stuff. In the beginning, we were building plugins for Miro, that online whiteboard. We decided, okay, let's build a couple of plugins for Miro that helps product teams in the tasks that they do. So one of them is the business model canvas. It's startup entrepreneurship canvas in which you have different components for you to think about the different relevant aspects of a business. We built a plugin for that using GPT that you would give it a business idea and it would feel what are the core capabilities, who's your target, so this kind of stuff. We did like maybe 7 of them, a concept map generator, all of them. And one of them was persona canvas. So essentially that canvas you do with some quotes, what are the needs, what are the pains, all of that. And that was the first time that I saw that this sense of these models are really good at role-playing particular people. Because I would give it, hey, imagine you're a product designer and your challenge is coordinating with product managers and engineering. What do you think of a feature that could do X? And the feedback we got was from the model on that canvas was quite impressive. I was like, hey, these models maybe are starting to go beyond this just, oh, I can generate text like Shakespeare. I can write a poem about Pastéis de Nata in Shakespeare style. And maybe they can go deeper than that. Maybe they can simulate not only historical figures as we got accustomed to, but also maybe common day people challenges that have both. And that was the breakthrough in my mind. Then I read a couple of academic papers out of Menu One, which is a fundamental paper in this area, from Lisa Argyle and colleagues, in which they ran several tasks with GPT and compared the results with the same tasks on humans, and the results were pretty good. Then there's this post from Replicate on Twitter journalists that on Less Wrong that's called Simulators. And essentially it's kind of lays down the entire thesis of these models are simulators by nature. And then one of the things that made me really think this could be valuable was understanding that, of course, the training data of these models includes all sorts of stuff, marketing websites, academic papers, blog posts, Medium stuff, everything. But one reason why I say these models get really good at what we do is that they read subreddits. It's part of the training data of Reddit, essentially, and forums. And forums and subreddits are places where people either anonymously or pseudo-anonymously talk about the stuff that they care about, that they struggle with in a really open and honest way. And I think it's that ends up giving this magic almost abilities to these models of role-playing almost anyone, because they were trained with a lot of human experience. People complain about the problem. Oh, but that's fake. And you know that the training that are this is a lot of it, it's real human experiences, real honest human experiences. And that's why I think it ends up working really well.
Yeah, awesome. I'm super interested about your background. So you have a background in was it clinical psychology, you had development, the product management. How did all of those come together to maybe help you build this
Uh,
synthetic users?
it's an interesting thing. So I always loved science and tech, and but I always also loved the human sides of the world. So why do people behave the way they do? Why do people react with the emotions they do? And that's what took me to take a degree in clinical psychology. What ended up happening was when I finished my degree, I was invited by one of the teachers to become the lab manager of the psychology lab at my university. So for 6 years, I was doing support to all kinds of research, cognitive science, social psychology, behavioral economics, developmental studies. All of them, I was giving support to almost all the researchers at my university, helping them set up experiments, helping them run data analysis, figuring out software that they could use for particular tasks. So it gave me a really good understanding of how research works in the academic world. And one struggle that I had throughout all those years at my university was finding participants. Not sure if you know how this works, but in academic research, most times nowadays it's not exactly like this, but most times what happened was first and second year students, to get credit courses, they had to go and be part of experiments.
Ah,
And every semester, I had the researchers knocking at my door saying, Hugo, I need 200 participants for this study. I need 50 for this one. I need 200 for this one. And I never had enough participants. So how I move into tech is exactly trying to solve this problem. So I had this idea of building an online platform where researchers could recruit participants. Participants would get paid and run the studies online. Nowadays, this is commonplace. This was more than 11 years ago. And because I had this idea, I decided that I was going to do a startup. And I left my job at my university because I was recruited by my co-founder's agency to do social media management for the apps. Because my idea was I'm going to join this agency. They have developers, and I'm going to steal a developer. I'm going to convince them to build this with me.
did you tell the founder?
He knows now. He
Ah,
knows
okay.
now. No, at the time, of course, I didn't. Otherwise, he wouldn't hire me probably.
Yeah.
What happened is that I didn't steal a developer. I ended up becoming a product manager almost by accident. I was doing social media for one of those apps, and my boss really, I was always finding bugs and suggesting improvements. And one day she turns to me and says, hey, Hugo, you're always suggesting stuff that we should do and fixing stuff. Do you want to be the product manager? And I took my phone and around, I Google product management, and I was like, yes, I do want to be a product manager. And that's how I got into this. Since then, I've worked in several startups, some small ones, some larger ones. Funny enough, I ended up working before working with Kwame on synthetic users. I ended up working at Prolific that does exactly what I wanted to do 11 years ago. So you can recruit people from all walks of life, from all countries in the world to run studies with them. It didn't go well. It was during the pandemic and it was a fully remote, and I'm not a fully remote person. I
Uh,
like to be in the office with my colleagues. I like to have a whiteboard. I like the human interactions that come with building stuff. But that's essentially my part. So it's a little bit of mix of everything. And almost by accident, I'm solving the problem that I had when I left my university, my job there, which is finding people to learn about so we can help them solve some issues.
that's interesting because it's the same problem that I faced. So in my work as a copywriter, I typically had to recruit customers to interview or people to survey. And one of the problems, especially in B2B, it's hard to find these people to convince them to do these studies. And so I started finding out ways on my own with AI to kind of recruit, create these AI personas and test them. And yeah, so it's super interesting how we both stumbled on the same idea and you started developing it in a platform.
And that's essentially how ended up stumbling on you. It was
Yeah, yeah.
through the newsletter. I saw you write about, hey, how can you use AI to build your personas and get feedback? And I was like, I need to meet this guy. This guy the same thing as us. We're productizing it, but he's doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people right now out there in the world doing kind of equivalent. I think one of the things that we do really well is that it's almost an efficiency play. So even if someone is really good at prompt engineering and he understands the LLM well enough to compensate for some of the biases they have, sycophancy bias, they just want to please you. And you don't want that when you want feedback on your product. But even if they're really great prompt engineers, one of the challenges is if you want to interview 12 people, you need to open new tabs and doing
Yeah.
everything by hand, which we automate in a really fast way.
Yeah, and also I like on your platform, you basically build these personas with questions. The platform
Yes.
asks you questions and you just reply, and it gradually builds up these profiles, which is nice compared to doing it manually and in different layers like I do.
And
Yeah,
it's funny, let me just add something there. It's funny because the reason why we had that kind of conversational interface of asking you, who do you want to, is there any country, is there any age that you care? Is because it was mainly for to combat something that happened with people who are less versed in research that ended
uh,
up coming to our website and saying, who's the audience you want to interview? And you would say people. And people, I'm really sorry, but it's such a broad group of humans
yeah,
that you won't get any value for that. So we built that conversational interface so we could help people get to a well-defined audience and to a well-defined research goal.
yeah. Because or otherwise, the other case that I see is people describe their personas as demographics data
Yes.
and not any psychographics or anything. So that's very helpful. I saw a study recently came out that said that you basically just need a 2 hour interview to accurately basically predict and capture values and preference for people. You
Yeah.
also ran a similar study that basically you saw that you can get like 85% accuracy or something like that.
Yes.
What do you think it's easiest and hardest to simulate as far as the people's decision making?
Okay. Well, that study, I was tagged by 7 different people on different posts about that study on LinkedIn because
Yeah.
people know what I'm working about, and they saw the study and were like, "Hey, Hugo, have you seen this one?" That study has it's slightly different from what we do. The goal for that particular study was 1,000 individuals, and they interviewed them for 2 hours because what they wanted was to be able to predict that specific individual and
Yeah.
positions, attitudes towards different objects, different topics, all of that. So what that study aimed at doing was mimicking exact individuals,
Yeah.
existing people. So cloning twin, in some cases people call it that. What we do is slightly different. We don't aim at predicting any specific person. We aim at predicting kind of archetypes within groups of people. And by doing that, allowing you to understand the group as a whole better. What's more challenging to predict? LLMs are getting pretty good. They are good at predicting price. So how much willingness to pay, how much would you pay for a service that will take your kids to school in a safe way every day? They have a good estimate of that. They surprisingly, which is something that people are like, I don't believe they do that. They're really good at predicting emotional reactions. So we come up with a novel situation. You come up with a story and you say, so at my Thanksgiving dinner, and my uncle just did this and described this. How do you think I reacted? They are really good at that already. It's quite impressive because people are like, oh no, but these are AI. It can do rational stuff. It can't really do the more humane, the more softer stuff. And surprisingly, they're really good at it. And some more rational stuff, as we saw with the how many yards a strawberry, or even doing math without using code, they struggle. It has to do with tokenization issues. There's a lot of reasons for that, but they kind of struggle. What I think they struggle with the most, and still they can get pretty good at it, is going for groups of people that have a really small online footprint. I
Mm.
normally use this example. I don't like it that much. It seems a little bit prejudiced. I don't use it in that sense. But if you want to understand farmers from Botswana, which by definition are not extremely online, they don't have a huge online footprint, they don't write vlogs about their farming practices, so there's not a lot for the LLM to work from a first person view perspective, they're going to struggle a little bit more. But then I run the study, I run that example on my platform, and the results are not bad.
Ah.
And the reason for this is that LLMs, of course, they gain a lot from what I mentioned: subreddits, forums, first person accounts of experience. But they read also academic research. It's part of their training corpus, not really in real time, but it's part of the training corpus. And there's academic research about farmers in Botswana. There's academic research about farmers in Africa in general. There's academic research about Botswana in general. The LLM is also able to, through the connection, the weights of the model, to also give you pretty good results in that sense. But essentially, the hardest part of getting LLMs to simulate particular groups of people or situations is when they don't have a lot of information in their training data. But they're still pretty good at extrapolating for adjacent information that can be relevant there.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, I was thinking about the difference between maybe creating B2C personas versus B2B. B2B personas, maybe, except for maybe writing on LinkedIn, have maybe a smaller footprint than like B2C personas. So
True.
maybe,
But then you have Harvard Business Review, then you have a lot of academic
yeah,
paper, ergonomics, and that kind of research areas in which you study how particular workflows are done, what are the inefficiencies. So they end up having not necessarily first-party accounts of those experiences, but also from the academic side, they can infer pretty good.
yeah, yeah. How do you think synthetic user simulated decision making differs from that of a real persona?
Okay. So this is a challenge since day one in our product, which LLMs tend to be a lot. Now we're getting better at it with most of the systems we built, and the models, the base models themselves, that are also better at doing this. But they tend to be more rational than real humans. With the good guidance, you can get them to be more emotional and get them to be less strict. But that is one of the challenges we have, is that sometimes you ask, hey, how do you decide to buy a ticket for a vacation? And they go and they say, oh, I do this first, this, that, this next. And from just personal experience, you sometimes say, oh, no, there was a huge discount. And I never was in I've never been to Bratislava, so I did it on a whim. And LLMs tend to over explain themselves and over rationalize, which is funny because with a lot of studies that we do for with humans, that's also what we know, is that sometimes we make decisions on a really emotional in
Yeah,
intuitive way. And then system two kicks in and explains that decision to ourselves. It's not even to others,
yeah.
it's just to ourselves. So this over rationalization is also a reflection of how we are as humans.
Have you tried? So one thing that I'm trying to do, not sure still if how accurate that is, but it's an interesting experiment. When I prompt the persona to wear the shoes of whoever I want it to be, I also tell it, also include your thought process or your inner monologue inside like brackets, just to see. I would like them to share what they are thinking rather than they're also telling me stuff. Have you tried that? Does it really work?
I do. There was a time that we did that. We used some special tokens because then we would hide the thought process from the response that we on our thing. And from our evals, it didn't make that much of a difference. But
Okay.
it's a good way to probe the insights of the LLM and the thought process. One interesting thing is that there are studies showing that if you do that before, it has an effect. Ask for a decision and then to explain the decision,
Mm,
most times it's a confabulation. It really doesn't follow even from the decision itself. It's a post
okay.
hoc rationalization like humans.
Interesting. How do you account for cognitive biases or like heuristics in models?
We want that. The thing is, so one thing that we and Kwame have been discussing a lot is that you see all this conversation with recent models and everything and AGI. We're going to go for super intelligence. That's one of the goals of these labs and these providers is to make models that can surpass human intelligence. In our particular case, that's not at all what we want. What we want is humaneness. We want biases. If I can get an LLM to have a confirmation bias, to have a recency bias, to have an availability bias, that's perfect for me because that's how humans work. There's a huge research field in psychology, which is heuristics and biases. Essentially, Giga Zanger, the lot of researchers that have dedicated their entire careers at mapping out what are the human biases that we have. Loss aversion was one of the essential ones in the behavioral economic field with Kahneman and Tversky kept coming up with figuring out that's something that happens with humans. And in our case, the more I can get LLMs to be biased in the same way as humans, the better job I'm doing.
Mm.
Because if they by default they tend to not have a lot of them, still there's some research showing that they have more than we would expect. But we need those biases because it's how humans work, and if our goal is to reproduce humans,
Yeah.
that we need to have them.
And do you think that those biases come with the archetypes? So each archetype maybe comes with their own biases? Is that stuff that
Yes.
the AI can pick up?
Yes, I think so. Not sure if you noticed, but for example, we give personalities to each
Yeah.
of our synthetic users. We give them, so there's one thing in psychology, it's the best studied personality model, which is called Ocean or Big Five for openness, extroversion, conscientiousness, ocean, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So
Uh,
it's big five pillars of
yeah.
every person's personality. And we give those no, we give each of the synthetic users that, but a specific personality, exactly because we understood early on. Now there's papers. It was an intuition of mine, but now there's papers confirming it that if you put it high on your eroticism, the decision process will be a lot more rushed, will be a lot more intense. So they do work as guidance
Yeah.
for specific stuff. So there was one, I remember one thing that I tested early on. There's a paper about one instrument that is called ambiguous situation test. Essentially, it's a way for you to see if the person is depressed, if the person is having anxiety, because it's a situation that can be interpreted in different ways. What I did was that's a human instrument, but what I did was I took the instrument, I gave it to an LLM, but before I told it, you're an anxious person. And the answers of the interpretation of the
Uh,
ambiguous situation were aligned with
uh,
anxiety. So it does make a difference.
yeah, yeah. There's another thing that's interesting that you do for creating diversity, which is basically shuffling between aligned models and unaligned, which is basically aligned models are basically models that are with guardrails, right? Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So how does that happen?
So the thing is, by need, most of the providers ended up having to create. So the models go through three phases. The main models people interact with nowadays go through three phases. The first one is pre-training, and essentially what you get at the end of that stage is a pure completion model. So it's a model that if you wanted to say something, you need to write prompts in a very precise way. You can't simply ask what's the capital of France because
Mm.
if you ask one of those models, what's the capital of France? Probably of the completion will be what's the capital of Italy, what's the capital of Spain, because they haven't been trained to follow instructions,
Yeah.
which is the second stage of training a model, the ones that we interact with, is training the model to go beyond being just a completion model. So on the first one, if you wanted the answer for that capital of France, the correct prompt you should write should be the capital of France is, and then let the model, because
Okay.
he can only complete, he can't follow
Yeah.
orders. On the second stage, you've trained the model with a lot of pairs of instructions and answers on top of the base model, and it now starts to be able to follow questions, to follow guidance, all of that. That's what creates ChatGPT. That's essentially what unlocks interacting with a model, less prompt engineering and more. I can just ask stuff. The third step is what's called reinforcement learning through human feedback, and that's where these kind of guardrails come in. So what they do is they gather huge set of instructions or questions, and therefore each one of those they have the model generate several responses. So same model generates response A, response B, response C. Then they have people contracted by companies like Scale AI. They have annotators that get a set of instructions. The humans get a set of instructions, and they're told, I'm going to show you pairs of answers for one question. You're going to see the question, you're going to see two answers, and I want you to select what is the most helpful one. Or I want you to select which one is non-sexist. I want you to select which one is dangerous. I want you to select. So they get this set of instructions to the human annotators, and the human annotators do this thousands and thousands of times. And through that, they train a policy. So the model, from that moment on, starts following those guardrails. Be
Yeah.
less offensive, don't be sexist, don't be racist, which is a huge challenge for us. Because if you think about it, I don't see this happening. I never saw anyone calling me and say, hey, I need to generate racist people. But my product theoretically is supposed to do that, because there are racist people out there in the world.
Yeah.
Someone might be interested in studying them. Someone might be interested in selling them a product, all of that. And these models, because of this last stage of training, they can't be. And a good thing. We don't want to put models out there that start saying that Hitler was a good guy. Hitler was
Yeah.
not a good guy. So let's not have models that interact with the public do that. But in some cases, I need to go beyond those guardrails, because some people have opinions that are less consensual or even wrong, but they do have them. And my system should be able to some extent, to reproduce that. And that's why we shuffle not only between instruct models and base models and RLHF models, but also through different providers, exactly to dilute any guidance that any particular model, a breadth of response that corresponds more to what you would see out there in the world.
Yeah. So speaking of different, like the commercial models, what are the major differences that you see? Or would you put them in two buckets, or how would you categorize them, if
I
anything?
think I think for the common user, the GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, new. I hate these version names
Yeah.
that they get, but Gemini, they're quite equivalent. It's mostly a matter of user experience. So how does the interface of ChatGPT compare to the Claude.ai interface? A notebook LM go wild online. Why? Because it was a really cool interface, a really cool new way of interacting with models. It has a really specific purpose. It's not a model that tries to come up with stuff. It's really the entire system was built around the sources, the idea of sources, and using those sources to do whatever you want there. But in general, I don't think models from a pure consumer perspective are that different. When we start talking about systems like ours that involve complexity, that involve quality, speed, trade-offs, so I have some parts in my system that I can't use the best models that are available, simply because I need them to be so fast at that
Yeah.
particular stage that I'm willing to do a trade-off of not having a
Less.
405 billion parameter model and have a 70 billion parameter model, because the speed is really crucial at that step. When generating the interviews, that is no longer the case. In that case, and I hope my customers understand that it might take a little bit longer, but I need to use the best-in-class models for those tasks.
Yeah. Though I did a fun little experiment on my own. I was asking LLMs for help making a decision for hiring someone that I'm hiring. So I basically narrowed down to two people. I shared transcripts to see which one to get an objective outside perspective basically. And then when I tried with ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, all three gave me kind of their own responses. So then what I did was taking all the responses and feed them to the other two and asking them which one do you think is the best. And it was interesting to see that Claude was the only one that said that his response wasn't really the best and said that Gemini's response was probably the most accurate
Oh,
or
cool.
useful for me. All the other two basically said that their own response was the best, but the others had merits.
Had some valid points. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's quite interesting because until recently, every time you use LLMs as judges, which is what you're describing, it has been shown that they have a self-serving bias that they
yeah,
can, without knowing. So you generate one in Claude, one in Gemini, and one in ChatGPT, and then you open a new tab and you say these three answers, which one is best? They tend to prefer their own answer, which is
yeah,
cool. So it's quite interesting that you're mentioning that Claude was the
yeah.
only one that was able to detach
The
himself
test.
and be more neutral, which is an amazing thing. I think really cooked with this model, as people say. It's
Yeah.
an amazing model.
There's another interesting aspect that I'm always thinking about, especially when I do some. In my case, it's testing messages with my AI personas, basically providing variants and asking which
Mhm.
one do you resonate with the most, which is the tendency of LLMs to like to please you. And in that case, like they might want to, I don't know, please you, saying that oh, this headline is amazing. So how do you account for that in synthetic users?
Before I explain a little bit of how we manage that. Humans do this all the time. There's some effects that's called experimental effect or demand effects in psychology and research in general, which is if people get a feel of what you want, they're going to give that to you. So it's with humans and something that people who are trained in research are trained exactly to try to mitigate that to the most extent possible. One thing that when I do research with humans, that happens a lot and that I do to avoid that is I tell people that the product is not mine, that I was hired to bring feedback to the people who are building the product so they don't feel that attacking the product is attacking me. I give them that space. And it's something similar in some cases that I do with LLMs. But in our case, one of the things that we wanted with two types of interviews. We wanted with problem exploration, which was these two types of interviews are a lot more constrained than what's possible today, but it was mainly to manage risk. We weren't sure how good the models would be. So we designed these two. One, problem exploration. I just want to understand how this group of people experiences this problem. What solutions have they tried? Do they work? Do they not? And the other one is concept testing. So you already know the problem quite well and you brainstorm some solutions, some concepts, some ideas that you want feedback. And on that particular interview, we designed both the prompt and the interview script to be kind of
Yeah,
it was part of the prompt saying that you are extremely honest. You are an extremely honest person. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You're okay with other people not liking what you say. So to get them to go beyond sycophancy, which is the definition of
mm,
they trying
pleasing.
to please you so much. And then the questions themselves were, what concerns do you have about this idea? What failures can you see happening by using this product? What are the shortcomings? So the interview was also designed to be towards the negative side because I don't want people to come here. I always use this example. In the beginning, if you go to now it doesn't happen, but in the beginning, if you went to ChatGPT and you said, "Hey, I have this idea. I'm building a product for busy moms, and my product is dog food that they can also feed their babies." ChatGPT would say, that's an amazing idea. It would be so much more efficient my breakfast time because I could feed the dog and the kids at the same time. We as humans know that 99% of people that you would pitch this idea to would say, you're fucking crazy because I don't want to feed my dog's food to my baby. That's just stupid. This was something that I used in my product in the beginning because it was my test to see am I doing a good job? Now I need to use what subtler is examples than that, because that is quite easy for the model to say, no, that's stupid. So I need to go for more nuanced stuff. But it's essentially something that it's one of the advantages of using my product in comparison to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, all of them, they don't want to hurt you. They want to be your friends, and so they tend to try to please you as much. And in my product, they don't want to be your friend. They have needs and they have things they want. And if you're not providing, and they're going to tell you.
Okay, good. There's another kind of aspect I try to take into consideration when I create these AI personas on my own, which is RAD, basically providing context information to the AI. What I do is basically I conduct my research with real people as I can. Sometimes it's not a lot, sometimes it's enough. And then I feed it to the AI and tell it to wear the shoes of those personas so that it can absorb their language and their mental models. Do you see a lot of difference between just using AI personas, synthetic users that take from the internet versus those that take from the context that you feed them?
I'm going to say one of those phrases that it's a truism, but it depends a lot on the quality of the data.
Okay.
And if you want to do, I hate RAG, I hate the name. I think it's an overcomplicated retrieval augmented
Yeah.
generation. I think it's
Like
just
everything in AI.
context. Exactly. It's just context. It's just context. It's nothing more than that. But LLMs are quite sensitive to context. So if you give them a misleading context, they're sometimes not able to ignore it, and they go towards
Yeah.
that side that they shouldn't. But as long as you have high quality data that is specific, if you the data you want to include, so we do have RAG as a feature. We have import your data for enterprise customers, so they can market research reports, they can upload interview transcripts, they can upload all kinds of data to enrich their custom tailored synthetic users. And when they do have high quality data, it makes a difference. It does make a difference. But it needs to be data that's non obvious data. It needs to be stuff that it's not. It can't be someone complaining about Salesforce. There's enough instances of people complaining of Salesforce online or Jira. It's my personal hate is Jira. I think it's one of the worst products ever. So I don't need to include transcripts of people saying Jira is clunky, is slow, do tasks, because there's enough in the training data. But if it's data that followed, you created, and you feel that it's quite unique and can really bring a unique perspective, it really does make a difference. But these models are surprisingly good, even without.
Yeah, yeah. Or the same example is feeding it, I don't know, reviews where 90% of people say, oh, support was great, but no one talks about the actual product.
Exactly. For example,
Yeah. I wanted to pitch you or give you some thoughts on two ideas that I've had like for personas. I don't know if you guys already tried it or if it's even possible now, but when I saw that Claude released, I still don't have access to it, but the computer
computer use.
control, right? I was thinking, what if I create a persona with Claude and then I ask it to use to look at my website to evaluate the messaging on my website, to navigate my website, right? I could do user testing, I could do message testing. And the other thing is I still haven't tried. The only one that can do it, I think, is Gemini, which can watch video, I think. And
Yes. Yeah.
what if I share usability testing videos with Gemini? Would it be able to extract insights from watching the videos?
Oh,
So those two things, have you tried any of
so
those?
I'm going to start on the second one. Yes. Yes, I haven't seen anyone do it specifically, but I'm 95% sure that Gemini would do a pretty good job at saying, hey, people are not understanding on that page where they need to click to do the next thickly with those sync aloud protocols in which people, while doing the task,
Yeah,
are also it's telling you what they
explaining
think
the
and
thought
what
process. Yeah.
exactly. I'm pretty sure that works. On the
What
first one,
the what does it actually do? Does it watch the video? Does it transcribe it? What happens in the
and
background?
then it doesn't. I'm. I don't think it transcribes. I don't think it's necessary for it to transcribe. So you can give it a
Ah,
non-audio video, and it will understand. I think it's kind of a
okay.
frame-by-frame digestion that
Mm,
then is also has a temporal sequence model that can just see the flow of information and not just single screenshots, which
ah,
it's a computer use does. Plot computer
ah,
use, it's not a video stream. It takes a screenshot, you give it a
ah.
task.
Okay.
And he goes, decides, okay, I'm going to use Chrome. He opens Chrome and takes a screenshot, returns the screenshot back to the model and says, to do this task, this is where you are. What should you do next? And the model responds. So there's that search bar in the center. Click on it. And it returns the coordinates, and a mouse goes and clicks that coordinate. Shot again. So you have the blinking cursor on that search bar. What should we do? Now, watch the keyboard and write socks that keep you warm in the winter. And it does that. Takes a screenshot. Now click search. Takes a screenshot. Now you see the results page. There's a list. Now click the first one. So this is how Claude computer use works. And it should be quite easy to build a usability testing product with that kind of system. I had thought about this before, and not to do one of those bragging moments, but I had thought about building exactly that. Screenshots, go to vision model, return coordinates, ask for next action. It's great that I'm not undermining Anthropic at all. Great that I think they did a great job at implementing it, but it's quite simple. It's not
Yeah.
a stream of video. It's different from a stream of video would be even cooler. And I think you can build a usability product for that. Once we consider doing this for synthetic users, because hey, I want to see, I'm selling insurance to people who are above 75. So they have vision issues, this of that. Can you simulate 75-year-old going through my insurance website and buying a product? And I wanted to build something for this. But I think there are other companies that are so better positioned to do this. Those companies that do already automated testing, they have the data. It's more about them figuring out what constraints they need to put in depending on what kind of persona. And I think it's easy to do with also code issues, all of that, that we decided not to go there. We're going to be
Okay.
building something around vision, but it's going to
Ah,
be mostly for testing product packaging. Which
nice.
one would appeal you more if you saw it on a supermarket? Which one conveys more the idea of sustainability? Which one conveys more the idea of wellness? So this kind of stuff. That's where we're going, not necessarily for UIs. I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, can I import Figma to your product
Yeah.
and have your synthetic users click through? I'm like, it's a cool use case, but sometimes you need to say no to great, and it's a bit of what we did there. But
Yeah.
both of
Yeah.
those two of your two ideas are pretty good.
Nice. Okay. What would you tell to those people who say research without user is not a research? Because I saw an article from Nielsen Norman Group, which are
Yes.
they're great. I love them. But yeah, it was controversial. So what do you tell people who use that
First of all,
certificate?
regarding that article, I'm really thankful for both of the authors to have interviewed me. They did something that most people who dismiss my product don't do, which is need the opportunity of replying and understanding better what we
Yeah.
aim. And then they did another thing. I don't think they did it really well. I think they had their own biases, but they tried the product, which is more than what 90% of the people who are against my product or think my product doesn't work do. Most people who
Hmm.
are against my product don't even try it.
Yeah.
So, user research without users. This takes us back to one thing that I think is fundamental within my product, which is humans are more predictable in a lot of situations than we expect. We designed that headline with a specific purpose of making people outraged and getting them to say, these guys are really fucking stupid. Because every time they do that, they are sharing my link, and I get more people who say, maybe they're not that stupid. My first
Yeah.
tweet when we launched the product was essentially that, was me, user research without users. Damn, you must be fucking stupid. So we knew the reaction. We baited people into that reaction because humans, the individual, so each particular person is quite hard to predict. But on aggregate, we're a lot more predictable. And some of our characteristics can be quite good proxies for the way we behave. So that's essentially why my product works. And that's all of people like you and people who do research, which is when you build products, sometimes you go and interview particular people, but you're not looking for that particular person's challenge. There's a reason to do one user interview. You do several of them because you're looking for commonalities. You're looking for surprising insights that are shared across different people. So you're not looking to understand John Smith
Yeah.
specifically. You're looking to understand people that have the same challenges as John Smith, that have the same job to be done, they're in the same demand space, all of that. So you're looking for patterns and reshared. And what these language models are pretty good at is at understanding those patterns at scale,
Yeah.
understanding that women struggle a lot more with workplace harassment than men, understanding all this kind of stuff, and then giving you the ability to tell them to role play any of those patterns.
Yeah.
So
You
just one thing. Keep talking to humans. We put that copy there. It was an intentional one. It was kind of baity. It worked, but we don't aim at getting people to stop talking to people. But it's hard. It's expensive to talk to people. So when you go talk to them, you should be as well informed as possible, so you can go for deep stuff and not just understanding the high level challenges they might have.
yeah. Also because I think knowing your audience and doing the actual research first helps, like, informs how you then poll the AI and ask it for questions,
Of
because
course,
you
of
don't if you
course.
don't know anything, then you can't even ask the right questions to
Exactly,
the AI.
exactly, exactly.
I wanted to ask you one last question about, you've used your own product to build your own product, which is a very interesting experiment. What was the surprising thing there, if any?
I do this all the time. We're about to launch a new feature, and it would sit that its users will decide it on demand. I brainstormed with Claude, I brainstormed a couple of names, 9 names in total, and I had my personal preference, and my co-founder didn't like the one. And I ran 10 interviews with user and market researchers. And I essentially what I told my AI researcher was, this is the product I'm working on. I described synthetic users. This is the product I'm working on. And I now have this new feature which does this. And I have these 9 names. Can you go and interview this group of people and bring me back which one should be selected? And they selected mine. And I was
Yeah.
so happy. I was like, I know it's confirmation bias, but I didn't bias the thing at all, because it was just a pure 9 names. Help me figure out which one is the preferred one. And they came back with the one that I like the most, which is the Portuguese word for prisma, which I really like, because it's what does is the same thing that a prism does, which is it takes one thing and divides it into the relevant components. And
Yeah.
essentially, that's what this feature also does.
Nice. Yeah, it's the same in Italian, actually. Prisma.
It
It's the
is?
same.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. My last question is, I want to know where you go to learn, because especially like for all the papers that come out, do you have any specific source or people that you follow to be
I
plugged
do.
in?
So I'm I spend too much time on Twitter, for
Uh,
sure. I think Twitter, with all the complaints we might have about the tool, is an amazing place, particularly if you're working on AI. There's so many papers that come out every day that it's almost impossible for you to just spend time on archive
yeah.
randomly choosing papers. So you need to have a feed, and I've curated my feed actually around that idea of following people that I think bring a lot of value. So, of course, Ethan Malik, the main guy on AI, explaining how AI works for most people in business and kind of the common man. Then I follow really good people that work at the providers, at Anthropic, Logan now at Gemini, Alex at Anthropic, some really cool people at OpenAI too. But I've had, but I read a lot. I remember throughout my life, particularly in professional settings, I always had people like, "Oh, fuck, you so many things. How do you have a system? Do you have a structure?" And I'm like, "No, no, I don't use Obsidian. I don't use Evernote. I used to, but I don't have a productivity system. I don't save stuff typically. I don't save stuff, but it's not really true because I have 500
Uh,
tabs open on my phone.
oh my God, I hate that. I close them as
So,
soon as I have
and
4.
as you can see, most of them are archived papers. It's GitHub repositories. So I don't stress with finding information. I think things end up coming to you. I don't stress with saving information. I think if it's relevant, your brain does the work and it comes back to you.
Yes.
So I don't have a list of people. Hey, these are the people you should follow. Go see my followers, the people I follow on LinkedIn, on Twitter. That should give you a good approach. But you're
Mm,
1,000 of them.
yeah. Cool. Where's the future heading, do you think, for synthetic research?
I think the future is, so until today, it was a conscious decision. We focused on just the first part. So it giving you stuff to think about. But you're still the one who needs to decide what the copy should be, what the product should be, what the feature should be. So ideation, brainstorming, all of that, we've intentionally stayed away from it. But I think more and more, we're going to be moving also to that side. Not only about capturing relevant information and extracting what might be surprising, what might be insightful, but then leveraging that into helping you build towards the build part. Claire Full, she works at OneStar. If I'm not mistaken, built a really cool product called Chat PRD. Essentially, it's a chat-based product to help product managers write good product requirement documents, all of that. And I think that's a space where we're going to be entering to. Essentially, a product that builds products, a product that you get there and you say, I want to help shared custody parents. So parents who are no longer together, but still have a child, and it comes with their own challenges. And you say this to the product, goes interviewing shared custody parents, maybe professors, maybe legal family law experts, figures out what the problems are, brainstorms how they could be solved. And now with stuff like Claude, with Cursor, with V0, it might even build the product itself. Yes. Even run some ads on Instagram and on Facebook with copywriting written by the model to test if there's a pull from the market or not.
Yeah, and then my job is done.
Everyone's job is done. To be honest, it's not just mine is done too. I just want to retire.
Let's all go work for synthetic users because they're going to dominate the world. Awesome. Cool, Hugo, thank you so much. Where can people find you? So syntheticulsers.com, obviously.
And then on LinkedIn, it's Hugo without an H, UGO _ Alves, ALVES.
And we'll link to it.
Synthetic Users also on Twitter with the handle Synthetic Users. And that's it. Not on LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn. Yeah. I need to spend time on LinkedIn because I have a product that I need to promote, that I need to defend, that I need to explain. So I'm forced to spend a lot of time there, but it's a product that I deeply hate.
But I know
there.
But I know that you like trolling people in the comments on LinkedIn sometimes.
I do. And it's a real challenge to be building a product in this space. I don't want to be tiny violin, but I get a lot of hate. I get a lot of really people saying nasty things about me and offending me personally. It's not about the product. It's me. I'm all kinds of names. So the only way for me to be able to handle that is if I troll a bit and push back a bit too. Otherwise, I would just break down.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Hugo. And
thank you so much for the opportunity, Chris.
Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.